Okay, Future Bob here. This video is a breakdown on a customer's Tandem. They had had it built up by another company, and you're about to watch the time lapse of the service that I ended up having to do in order to get the bike to work in the first place. After the time lapse, there'll be a much better breakdown of what was done, how it was done, why it was done, all that good stuff. But just as a bit of a preamble, didn't want to just dump you in there with no explanation as to what's going on. So please enjoy the time lapse. It will make sense in the long run, because this was done March of last year. So it has been nearly a year since the footage you're about to watch was recorded. It's obviously all done at the time of having the bicycle in front of me, as you'll see. So hopefully this kind of makes a little bit more sense. Anyhow, enjoy. Thanks, guys. that was quite the mission. This is kind of an intro, an outro, bit of everything, because just starting this job, didn't really know what the lay of the land was. But long and short of it is, inherited problem here, doing a bit of technical support work for ebikes.ca over in Canada. This bike has basically been fully kitted out with all their equipment. We've got a cycle analyst, we've got a phase runner, sorry, not a phase runner, we've got the base runner controller, one of their all axle front motors, which actually, first one I've properly had a chance to handle, fucking mint. And yeah, it's a really cool setup. It's busy as you like, but the idea with this bike is to go touring. So we've got pannier racks, we've got 4 brakes to work with, we've got a roll off, they're charging phones, they've got power banks, lights on here, throttle, all the control gear for the CA and base runner controller and all that kind of garb. It's busy. We've got phone charging, the works. I mean, it's yeah. So the problem that we were facing at the beginning was that the controller talks to the computer. It will go through the motor setup procedure, but beyond that, absolutely diddly squat was happening as far as torque sensor assist or throttle control. We've also got, failed to mention there, we are running a Thun style bottom bracket torque sensor power delivery system on this with the hydraulic disc brakes. We've also got the Grin push brake switch external to the brake as well, so that was added in. But I digress. I inherited this problem because the controller basically, well, the bike wasn't functioning properly. The most they managed to get out of it was either having the torque sensor to work but no throttle or regen, or they had throttle but no torque sensor or regen. And the other complication for this one was they wanted to have variable regen as well as the brake kill switch, and obviously the active regen that you get there. So after spending basically 6 hours of going through, checking what was done on the computer, checking what settings have been set up in the CA, I lost the plot a little bit, not going to say. Spent so long on it, and basically the only conclusion at this stage is that something happened to the previous controller. Don't know what. Nothing, no faults coming up on the diagnostics, no warnings in use, nothing. But all you would get is as soon as you push the throttle, the motor just backed straight into regen and just judded like an absolute bitch bag. So something fundamentally was not right, even though it would recognise the motor and all the rest of it. So what we have done is we have fitted one of our controllers from our stock and tested the whole system again. With our controller, the basic test I needed to get sorted out was to make sure that at least the throttle works, because if the throttle works, everything else can be programmed and resolved from there. And using one of our crappy batteries from one of our old projects, got the motor to fire up, got the controller to talk to everything, and it worked straight away. No mucking around, same settings on the cycle analyst, basic settings in the controller setup, and everything gravy. So at that point, really the customer, they've travelled several hours to get to us, they're spending time with family, etc. So a bit of a pressure, 3 days straight basically on this now, of trying to get it right so that they can take it home with them and at least start using it, because they've been waiting for the better part of 2.5 months for it up to this point with no avail from the original fitters. So we're putting on one of our controllers. The only thing we haven't been able to do for them is motor temperature on the CA, and what else was it? Pete's sake. The variable regen. Basically different inputs and outputs on the controller that we have for our uses, so just we don't have the option for it, but we still have active regen, which we can set the percentage of, which is fine. Motor slows you down beautifully before the brakes touch rotor, which is fabulous. So all in all, we've given them exactly what they initially set out to do with their original controller, but just with one of ours. They had the V5L9. I can't remember precisely which one I put in from us, but basically, there were a few incorrect settings. We've only got a 14.5 amp hour 48 volt battery on this thing, and it was previously set for 70 amps of current draw, which, let's face it, is going to fry the battery. So there's been a few things that we've had to sort of get in and remedy beyond the simple physical setup of everything. So the bike. Cockpit is, as I say, exceedingly busy. It's not necessarily how I would want it to be, but then again, I would build a very different bike for myself. It works for these guys, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. They're happy with it. Again, it's just a bit of a forest at the front here, but I can't do nothing about it. I've tidied it up as much as I can within reason. But one of the things we've also done, you might have been able to see in the time lapse, is actually mount the controller externally from the bag. It's not necessarily going to be putting high load through it. We've limited it to 30 amps, mainly because of the battery, but it wasn't, the previous controller was not fitted with a heatsink, and it was buried at the bottom of this bag. So of course, you know, set at 70 amps, that's gonna get hot, really, really hot. And of course, it's an insulated bag, which means the controller is basically either going to thermally cut out or it's just going to melt itself. The protection in these things is pretty spot on, so I doubt it would have just killed itself, but it's not going to help it. So we've got this in airflow, big lump of aluminium on the bottom as a heatsink, additionally to the heatsink plate and the mounting plate for the controller itself. And obviously we've stood off a solid base for water bottle and all that kind of jazz as well. So that's on there, good and solid, keeps the controller in the airflow, should be mint without obviously impeding crankability. It's narrower than the bottle cage, and also it makes the wiring, albeit visible, far easier to deal with if there's any faults. So as I say, we've got a hydraulic Magura brake here with the push switch for the brake switch. We have had to add on for their DC-DC converters. We've got separate connections now for the DC-DC and the controller power. So we've got XT150s from the main line back to the battery. And then we've got Andersons. Again, we're going to use a maximum of 30 amps. These guys are probably not going to sniff much of that at all, unless they're, well, until the highest part of the climbing. But again, the controller comes fitted with Andersons. I've heat shrunk them, made sure they're not going to separate or cause them any problems. Tried to weatherproof everything as much as possible, being that it is outside. And again, the motor cable is not ideal. I've basically had to make one to adapt it from the connection that we had on our controller to the connection that the customer has on their motor, which is why we've lost temperature. I might well have been able to re-plumb it in, but frankly, didn't want to chance it, not at this stage. I just need the bike working so that they can get out and running. And obviously, if we do get a replacement controller, then we'll be going back to having the proper connector, and that problem evaporates. But for the moment, they're just not going to have temperature indicated or motor temperature indicated on the screen. But otherwise, yeah, we've now got all the pop-ups sorted, so they can actually see, excuse me, so they can actually see what's going on. So we're on 0 now, but we've got throttle position switch, a throttle position indicator in the corner there. Oops, wrong lever. Brake pulled, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do the torque sensor, I'm afraid, but that's basically this little widget here, which will show you that you're actually putting some power down and letting you know that the torque sensor is working. So yeah, throttle assistance switches for the CA. They've also got park brake on here, additional front brake. They did have regen throttle mounted on here, but just taking that off for the moment just to clear the space. Frankly, after riding it the short distance that I have, I don't think they need to have proportional regen or the variable regen. Just set it to what you think is going to work. But at 35% at the moment, it feels absolutely brilliant. It's still pumping 500 watts back into the battery, so much more than that, and I think you'll start obviously getting overload issues, which we don't want. We'll certainly get the battery hot anyway. So yeah, I think realistically at this stage, we've got it to a point where, oh yeah, we sorted out the battery installation as well. Just the pin wasn't dropping through the hole that had been made in there, which is why we had that off. and actually secured the bolts for it as well, because everything was loose back there as well. So yeah, I think it's really time to go and take it out for a ride. It is a little bit minging out here today, but unfortunately I need to make sure that it works. So I'm going to take it for a little jaunt. It means the dog can go have a pee and a poo, so should keep everybody happy. But anyway, that's pretty much it. See you in a bit. Okay, back from the test ride, and we have success. Bike rides really well. Climbs hills beautifully, can maintain a great average speed, and yeah, it will definitely make an awesome touring bike for these guys. I look like an absolute Burke right now because I got utterly soaked, and as much as that makes me a bit miserable, fantastic testing for the bike. At the end of the day, it performed just spectacularly. We covered 14 kilometers, used just under 3 amp hours. Regen works beautifully. We got average speed 10.6 watt hours per kilometer, which ain't too shabby. Use 60 watt hours, 13.6% regen, we put 0.4 amp hour back into the battery using the regen on that, so that's not bad at all. We actually used 3.35 forward amp hours, but yeah, managed to stuff in nearly half an amp hour back into the battery. Maximum regen current 7.7 amps. Surprisingly, we've only, being that it's all set for 30 amp max on draw, we've only used 16.91. Sorry, probably should show you the actual screen. Max speed 39.1, average speed 17.4, and went out for nearly 50 minutes. Yeah, temperature's not set. Trip, total kilometers, doing a little bit of testing. It's nice. Yeah, obviously, yeah, loads of information available on there. But as far as the practical side of it, this motor is an 8-turn, so it's their slow winding. So awesome for torque. I mean, I stuffed it up a couple of very steep hills on site here, and it's effortless. It's just beautiful. And again, being that it's supposed to be carrying 2 people plus gear and all the rest of it, it's going to perform perfectly for what it's been built for. Probably cruise around 20-25 kph quite comfortably. So you know, as far as keeping it safe and flowing with the traffic, game on. When you get to around about 36-37 kilometers an hour, you do start to outpace the winding for the voltage of the battery. So again, their average speed is still going to be significantly better than without having the motor. Anyway, as far as the bike goes, we have a successful test ride. Thoroughly enjoyable, albeit somewhat damp, but there we go. Thanks ever so much, and well, we'll catch you later. Have a good one.